So, dear friends, during all of the things that we've been going through, I've been feeling more and more gratitude for Thich Nhat Hanh, that everything that he's gone through, the fact that he spent 70 years of his life looking deeply at the Buddha's teachings and translating them in a way that, and staying very connected to the essence of what the Buddha taught, and then combining them with Western psychology and being able to share them with people like me, that even I could understand them. I feel really, really grateful. And I feel that he's given us so many tools that are so helpful in going through the difficulties that we're going through right now. I wanted, like I said, to play you this short recording by the editor of Lion's Roar, Melvin MacLeod. I thought maybe hearing it from somebody else would be refreshing for you. I know I always am talking to you about reconciliation and reading the book, and I nag enough. So I thought we could begin tonight. I would just play you this. It's a reflection on Thich Nhat Hanh from Melvin MacLeod, and I hope that you can hear this okay. You can let me know.
Hi, I'm Melvin MacLeod, the editor-in-chief of Lion's Roar.
Can you hear this?
One of the best parts of my job is getting to meet great Buddhist teachers. I've been honored to interview Thich Nhat Hanh twice, as well as to attend one of his 5-day teachings and to edit 3 books of his teachings. Full disclosure, I consider him one of my Buddhist teachers because he's had a profound influence on my understanding of Buddhism and how it fits into the world today. I believe that he is actually, and this is perhaps a controversial statement, the most important Buddhist teacher of our time. And I want to point to 3 particular contributions that he has made and note their genesis in his life in Vietnam. So, first of all, is his profound presentation of foundational Buddhist concepts. He has helped us understand in a subtle yet accessible way concepts like mindfulness, compassion, pure land, that I think has significantly contributed to how the modern world understands Buddhism. That has its roots in what he describes as the singular feature of Vietnamese Buddhism from which he comes, which he describes as understanding original Buddhism, what the Buddha originally taught, from a Mahayana perspective, i.e., from the perspective of Buddhism as it unfolded in the subsequent millennia. And that's brought a unique understanding of foundational Buddhist concepts into our world. I think a lot of people might think that his presentation of these Buddhist principles is so simple that it's actually superficial, but in fact it's quite the opposite. It takes a great deal of realization and profundity in order to state things simply and clearly. People think that complexity is the sign of brilliance. In fact, it's simplicity. So his profound, simple, highly realized presentations of foundational Buddhist principles has really had a tremendous impact on how the modern world understands Buddhism. The second great contribution he's made is in joining together Buddhism with social, political, and environmental activism. And this again goes back to his days in Vietnam. He is considered the founder of the engaged Buddhist movement, and that has its roots in his early days as a courageous peace campaigner, a young Buddhist monk and poet who was putting his life on the line, trying his best to find an end first to the colonial war between the Vietnamese and the French, well, anti-colonial in fact, and then subsequently to the even worse war between the Americans and the communists. So, who found himself caught in the middle and attacked by both sides because he was campaigning for peace. He put his life on the line, and from that very real situation of conflict in which he found himself is born what we know today as the engaged Buddhist movement. So that is not have its roots in any kind of theoretical understanding of the relationship between Buddhism and political change, but actually comes from a person, Thich Nhat Hanh, who fought for peace on the front lines in the middle of a war, putting his own life on the line. That's the way in which one creates true political insight. Finally, I think, and this may not be something for which he's widely recognized, but I feel that Thich Nhat Hanh is the person who has most effectively and organically integrated Buddhism with the insights of Western psychology. And again, this goes back to his days as a student, as a young man in Vietnam, which of course at the time was a French colony, in which he studied Freud, in which he studied psychology and psychoanalysis, as well as existentialism and other forms of philosophy then popular in France at the time. And from that deep understanding of Western psychology, he has evolved a teaching on what he calls healing the wounded inner child within us, that I think more than anything else brings together in one seamless whole the profound insights and techniques of Buddhism with its understanding of the human mind, with the also deep, insightful understanding of Western psychology and its understanding of the roots of our suffering, or much of the roots of our suffering, in our own personal and family experiences. And I cannot recommend highly enough his book, Reconciliation, which I consider to be the single best integration of these two great philosophies of mind and emotion, which bring them together in a way to help us heal our inner suffering, I think better than anything else. So in those ways, with his profound teachings and presentation of foundational Buddhist principles, of his highly effective bringing of Buddhism to political change, as well as political change to Buddhism, and his integration of Western and Buddhist psychology, all based on his own experiences starting in Vietnam, I think he's not only the teacher for our time, he's the teacher of our time. He's the teacher who, more than anything else, has brought together the wisdom and problems of the modern world together with the profound insight of Buddhism in a way that no other Buddhist teacher has done as effectively. And so in that way, I think his impact both on Buddhism and his ability to make Buddhism beneficial to the world at large is unparalleled, and makes him the greatest Buddhist teacher of our time.
So, dear friends, perhaps we wonder how he really feels about Thai. I thought that was a beautiful, very succinct description of Thai's contribution and how our practice has evolved, where it came from. I think that, like I said, considering his experience, Thai and the Buddha both. The Buddha told the Kalama people when they asked, like, what teacher could we possibly believe? Every teacher says they've got the answer to everything. And the Buddha said, doesn't matter how famous the teacher, doesn't matter how wonderful the writings. He said, you need to trust your intelligence and your experience, that you need to practice what the teacher teaches. And if you find that it helps you develop peace of mind and happiness, that's a true teaching. So he basically said, don't take anybody's word for anything, not even mine. Trust your experience. And I like the fact that Melvin was talking about how Thay's teachings come from his experience, that his interpretation of what the Buddha taught is colored by his experience. So he definitely knows whereof he speaks. And this is why I think that it's been so helpful. Like I said, right from the beginning, in 1966, when he founded our order, he called it the Order of Interbeing, because he knew then that that's the basic thing that human beings, that our species really needs to understand and get a very, very deep understanding of, in order for us to survive as a species. He wrote the first book on the 5 mindfulness trainings, was called For a Future to Be Possible, because he felt if we don't understand interbeing, if we don't realize that we're all here to take care of each other and the planet, that we all are, that we are all single cells in this incredible organism, then chances are very good that our species cannot survive. It will not be sustainable. And at the root of a lot of the difficulties are the poisons that the Buddha spoke about. The Buddha taught about hatred and greed and delusion. And when we look at the situation we're in now, I feel is really interesting, because it's pulled the covers off, I think, of a lot of the gaping holes in the safety nets in our culture, that a lot of the inequities that have been there for a long time, that have been ignored, that it's a real opportunity for us to be able to look deeply to understand, how did this occur? What were the causes and conditions that led to this? And what is it we're going to do in order to create different causes and conditions? But before I go any farther with that, I wanted to play, as you know, I like usually to start with a poem. And tonight I was going to start with a poem by Thich Nhat Hanh, actually, about this. And then I thought, I would really like, the poem that I was thinking of was made into a song by the brothers at the Weston Priory in Vermont. And I thought I would love to be able to play you the song. It's a very beautiful song, I think. And then I'll tell you a little bit about Thich Nhat Hanh's commentary about this particular poem.
Alone again, I'll go on with bent head, but knowing the immortality of love, and on the long rough road both sun and moon will shine. Promise me this day, while the sun is just overhead, even as they strike you down with a mountain of hate and violence. Remember, brother, man is not our enemy. Just your pity, just your love, invincible, limitless. Hatred will never let you face the beast in man, and one day peace alone. Your courage in touch, your eyes kind. Out of your smile will bloom a flower, and those who love you will behold you across 10,000 worlds of dying and birth. Alone again, now go on with bent head, but knowing the immortality of love. And on the long rough road, both sun and moon will shine, lightening my way.
So, dear friends, that song was based on the poem called Recommendation by Thich Nhat Hanh. And in his commentary for the poem, he writes, he said, I wrote this poem in 1965, especially for the young people in the School of Youth for Social Service who risk their lives every day during the war, recommending them to prepare to die without hatred. Some had already been killed violently, and I cautioned others against hating. Our enemy is our anger, hatred, greed, fanaticism, and discrimination against men. If you die because of violence, you must meditate on compassion in order to forgive those who kill you. When you die realizing this state of compassion, you're truly a child of the awakened one. Even if you are dying in oppression, shame, and violence, if you can smile with forgiveness, you have great power. And this was written in response to the fact that he had 5 of his students executed. He had started a school of social work, and 5 of his students were executed. And when he heard about the execution, he was very concerned that his other students, if they were in the same situation, would die with hatred in their hearts. And in this song and in the poem, he cautions us to say hatred, man is not the enemy. It's the hatred and the greed and the delusion in human beings. That's the enemy. That's the real true enemy, because that's what creates the behavior in men or women, in people, I should say. So he says, on our path of service, there are moments of pain and loneliness. But when we know that we have the Sangha, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, we can feel a great surge of energy and a firm determination to carry on. So this is, I just find it so amazing, really, that people like Thai, people like Martin Luther King, I equate it with Dr. King coming home and finding his house had been bombed, and his wife and small baby were in the house at the time. They wound up not being hurt, but there was a whole group of men that had surrounded the house, and they wanted to go after the people who had done the bombing. They had guns and things. And he said, put down your guns and go home. He said, hatred will never, ever solve this problem. And for me, when I see people like Thai who are in the midst of that kind of horrific situation, and Dr. King, when the most precious things in your life have been threatened, to be able to maintain the view and to take care of your consciousness so you don't give in to hatred and violence yourself, but instead are able to see the delusion in the people who are practicing that. That's a very, very, very deep practice. But I just wanted to offer that tonight because I think, I don't know, to me it's really important that we understand where all these practices that we talk about and that we try to use, where they come from. That's the genesis of them. And when he talks about hatred will never let you face the beast in man. This is real. I find it to be really important. Hatred and anger. I don't know about any of you, but right now, all I have to do is listen to news sometimes, and I can feel the anger immediately come up in me, that anger at injustice, anger at and the sadness for the ignorance that goes on in our world. And it's so important to me to remind myself and to bring myself back and to say, do I really want to water those seeds in my consciousness? I don't think so. I don't think that's going to be helpful to myself or anybody else. At this point in time, I think it's really important that we are able to maintain the view. I know for me, when I first began the practice, it became clear to me before I started to practice, people might say or do things that were really hurtful to me. And I would find that my first reaction would be to have my hackles get up and have me feel like I don't want anything ever to do with them ever again. Why do I need them in my life? Yada, da, 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 da. And I knew that the practice had done some good when I'd been practicing for a while and somebody said something that was pretty hurtful. And I immediately felt compassion for the fact that they clearly were suffering. To be able to recognize the suffering in that person rather than to simply get caught in the surface of things. That was a totally revolutionary experience for me. It was something I had not experienced before. And so, and it's such a relief to not have to get caught in holding on to those knots of anger and resentment. And even when somebody's causing a lot of suffering, it is of no benefit to me or anybody else for me to strengthen those things in myself. It does no good. But like I said, the built-in knee-jerk response is, you hurt me, I want you to suffer, or you hurt my friend, I want you to suffer. And human history tells us that that really doesn't do any good at all. So anyway, I just wanted to offer those things tonight. And I wanted to say that one of the things that Melvin talked about was the fact that, that Thai had come up with engaged Buddhist practice out of his experience of the war. And he had also, an engaged practice for us means that we're able to take our practice into the world. That, and that can be in any way, whether it's with our family, whether it's in our workplace, whether it's with the government, anywhere. But I think it's important to remember that it does not have to be dualistic, and we don't have to get caught in them and us mentality. The 9th training, we have 14 mindfulness trainings that are the core of our order. That's what he came up with in 1966 to begin the order of interbeing. And the 9th training says that, and this is on truthful, loving speech. He says, we will speak only with the intention to understand and help transform the situation. Just think how much conversation that would limit if we all practiced will speak only with the intention to understand and help transform the situation. We will not spread rumors nor criticize or condemn things of which we are not sure. That would sort of take care of the rest of the conversation. And then we will do our best to speak out about situations of injustice, even when doing so may cause difficulties for us or threaten our safety. So we need to be as skillful as we can be. We need to maintain an open heart. However, we need to be able to speak out, and we need to be able to speak the truth about injustice as we see it happening. That's the 9th training. The 10th training says, aware that the essence and aim of a Sangha is the realization of understanding and compassion, we are determined not to use the Buddhist community for personal power or profit or transform our community into a political instrument. As members of a spiritual community, we should nonetheless take a clear stand against oppression and injustice. And this is critically important, that we don't use it as a political instrument. We don't speak out about specific parties or whatever. The situation we're in has very little to do with parties. We are experiencing a crisis for humanity and a health crisis. And it applies to everybody. It doesn't make any difference. It's global, the whole world. When Martin Luther King says we may have arrived on separate ships, but we're all in the same boat now, he was right. We absolutely are. And for us to try our best to constantly be reminding ourselves that it's not that we just don't take a stand, it's that we don't create dualities. We don't pit people against people. We don't, how can I say? Because if we look back in history, we'll see that the causes and conditions for what we've been experiencing have been in the making for many decades. And there have been a bunch of different parties in power during those decades. And everybody has a part that they've played in creating conditions. What I've invited everybody in the Sangha to do is do exactly what we do. This is a window, I think. I read a poem at our last meeting by a First Nation person who talked about how it could be a portal or a hole, that the situation we're in could either be a portal or a hole, that it's up to us. How are we going to respond to the situation? And I think that to get pulled into that kind of duality and divisiveness and hatred and anger, that's when we fall in the hole. That's when we're not going to be doing any good. But what I think that this could be a portal for is for us to look at where are all of those holes in the safety net, and where are all the loopholes in our Constitution, and what is it that needs fixing? Thich Nhat Hanh would say, we need to go home and tidy up. That's how he talks about things. We need to go home and tidy up. And it seems like it's definitely time for some tidying up. And so we can look deeply to see, okay, what needs some tidying up here? And just as we do when we're doing a beginning anew with another person, the first thing we ask always is, what part have I played in the difficulty? And to do that, we can just say, are there times I could have spoken out? Are there times I could have written a letter? Are there times that I could have helped someone in some way? Are there things I might have done or could have done that might have created maybe a few different causes and conditions? This is the time when we can do that kind of assessment, so that going forward, we can be doing our best to create the change in the world, just like Gandhi said, to be the change that we want to see in the world. I tell people all the time that we talk about, when do we get back to normal? And I think, well, if anything, this has shown us that normal wasn't all that it was cracked up to be, that normal wasn't really sustainable or very sustainable. So for us to evaluate, it's not to say everything was horrible, but what was okay and what was not okay. And what can we do to address the things that, and to make the world a better place? That really is what our practice is about. It's about transforming those poisons in ourselves. That's where we begin always. Transforming the hatred and the greed and the delusion in myself, so that hopefully I can get some more clarity, and hopefully I can be more of a help. That's the idea. I think that when Melvin was talking about the fact that one of Thay's big contributions was integrating Western psychology into Buddhism. I really, really have always recommended that book, Reconciliation, so I promised I wasn't going to nag, but here I go again. I think that at a time like this, when we can feel a lot of really strong emotions come up in us, a lot of times those things are directly connected with experiences we've had in childhood. And so if any of you are interested, there are lots and lots of practices in that book that help us to heal those places in us. And they actually color, they form our habit energy. The conditioning we've had forms our habits of mind. That colors our perception of everything. And so when we can go to the root cause of the suffering and see what has been my conditioning and what habits of mind have I developed because of that. And the example I always use is one of, had I been raised with a lot of criticism and judgment, my perception of everything would be that I'm under attack and I need to defend myself. If I have not felt safe in the family that I grew up in, I need to defend myself. I have that defensive posture that I bring into the world. Just to notice what is it I'm lugging around with me, and how can I do the healing and let it go? Because the more clarity and stability and solidity we can develop, the more benefit we're going to be in the time coming forward, I think. I think that the other piece of this, like I said once before, I think maybe to this group, I don't know, I've been doing so many of these Zoom things that I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but a lot of strong emotions, like I said, come up in us, and we're all going through grief, and as I said, part of grief is anger, and Thay wrote another really good book called Anger, on Anger, because he's had to deal with a whole lot of it in his lifetime, as you probably guessed from just hearing a little bit about what he's gone through. But the thing that I find is a lot of folks that I speak with who've been practicing a while feel guilty when they're feeling angry, or they feel guilty when they're feeling strong emotions. They feel like, oh, I'm a practitioner. I should be above all this. I shouldn't have these strong feelings. I shouldn't get angry. You're a human being. And as a human being, we all have those mental formations in our stored consciousness. And we need to honor all of them. We need to embrace those feelings as they arise. We don't want to just repress them and play for pretend that they don't exist, because when we try to do that, they just come out in oblique ways and can be very destructive. And so we want to be able to be really honest with ourselves. And I think the thing that inhibits us, at least this is what I've been hearing from people, they don't put it in these words, but what I was feeling was it's shame. That I shouldn't be feeling this way. I should be a superior human being. I shouldn't have these feelings. And I was so happy to hear on that same retreat that Lion's Roar produced, there's a wonderful Buddhist teacher named Bell Hooks, and she offered reflections on Thich Nhat Hanh. And it was so sweet. She said that when she met him, she was very excited about meeting him, but she'd just gone through a period of time when she was experiencing a whole lot of hurtful, racist things in her life. And she was feeling really, really angry a lot of the time. And so she met Ty, and he said, "How are you?" And she said, "I am really angry." And she said, "I couldn't believe it. Here I am meeting this world famous teacher, and I just couldn't control myself. I just had to say, I'm really just filled with anger." And she said, and in his inimitable way, he just smiled sweetly and said, "That's okay. You can use all of that anger as compost for your garden." Okay. And this is what he teaches us. It's all grist for the mill. It's all something we can learn from. We can learn about ourselves. We can really get to understand our anger. He's dealt with so much anger in his life that he says that now when anger arises in him, and it still does, he can just say, "Hello, anger, my little friend, you're back again." It doesn't have any energy in it anymore because he's so familiar. It's just he's made friends with it. So anyway, I think if you're experiencing any of those powerful emotions, fear, he wrote a good book called Fear. He wrote a good book called Anger, wrote a good book called Reconciliation. So, and he's offered us all these Dharma talks. The monastics have become really great teachers as well. We have so many resources available to us. We're very, 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 very lucky. We have a whole bunch of support. So if we're feeling like we're pretty puny and can't handle the stress of the moment that we're living in, we need to rethink that. In the past few meetings, I've offered a guided meditation for people to help us get in touch with our blood ancestors, our spiritual ancestors. And I'm not going to do that now because we have quite a large group and we'll probably be limited for time. But I think it was recorded, and web wizards will probably have that someplace for you to listen to if you want. But what I can offer you tonight would be to just contemplate all of your blood ancestors, all of our parents, our grandparents, as far back as we can go in history. And we can go even farther back than that. But to just remember all of the hardships that they've been through, what it took for them to be able to survive and procreate, the intelligence and the creativity and the stick-to-itiveness and the determination, the humor, perhaps, all the qualities that it took, they're all alive in every cell of our body. They're in our DNA. We need to remember who we are. A lot of times we feel that we're just these puny little bag of bones, and we're just quivering in the corner and hiding under our beds until it all gets better. We don't need to do that. We have been through, and a lot of times those feelings of fear come from childhood as well. So that might be a time to go back and do some healing. But we need to remember who we are. We have all the strength of all those ancestors alive in every cell of our body. We need to call on them to support us in the situation that we're in. And then we have our spiritual ancestors. And I look at Thai for sure. We could be a teacher. It could be Buddha, Jesus, Mary. It could be a wonderful teacher. It could be a dear friend. Somebody who's been able to show us unconditional love. Somebody who's been able to act as a mirror, to mirror back to us our highest and best self, our basic goodness. And that energetic transmission has been received. That energy is alive in every cell of our body. We need to remember. We also need to remember that every element in the cosmos is alive in every cell of our body. That the elements of the rain coursing through our veins, the water coursing through our veins, the oxygen, precious oxygen given freely, going into those lungs of ours, which are so precious. And we need to just be nothing but grateful for the oxygen, for our lungs, for our ability to take that in. And then we need to remember the minerals of the earth alive in every cell of our body, and the energy of the sun that gets transmitted to us through every piece of food that we eat. And our bodies are designed in a way to put that to good use so that it allows us, it energizes us and allows us to enjoy all the wonders of life. We are so lucky. So we need to remember when we're feeling like a little quivering mass of jelly, we need to remember that, no. I've got the wisdom of ages available to me. I need to remain calm. I need to go back to my breath. I need to take good care of my body. And I need to remember who I really am. That this is not about me. I am one little tiny cell in this big, wonderful organism. I'm one drop of water in the river of life. We are. We're not separate from. As I said, you take away the sun, we're not here. Take away the rain, we're not here. We are inextricably connected. We talk about the environment as if it's something outside of us. We are the environment. We're it. So to really, really, really try to grasp that state of interbeing. And to end tonight, I just wanted to read a poem that just coincidentally is entitled Remember. And it's also written by a First Nation poet named Joy Harjo, who's the Poet Laureate of the United States. And she says, remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are. Red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind, remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people and all people are you. Remember you are this universe and this universe is you. Remember all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember language comes from this. Remember the dance that language is, that life is. So join the dance and don't just quiver in the corner. That's my part of this. She didn't write that. But I love her poetry, and to be really reminded of the strengths that we have in us, the strengths that are available. And we just need to come back to our breath. We just need to get ourselves into that calm, still place and have some clarity. Ty says when we can have that kind of clarity, we don't have to worry about what to do. We know what to do and what not to do. So worrying doesn't even come into the picture. So my dear friends, I hope that I've offered you some reminders that can be helpful to helping you navigate the waters that we're finding ourselves in. And simply remember how important our Sangha is. Thai tells us when you throw a stone in the river, it sinks to the bottom. But if you put a whole bunch of stones in a raft, you can float them all right across to the river and they get to the other shore together. We're all in that raft. And when we go as a Sangha, we can easily get to the other shore together. So take good care of yourself, and thank you so much for being here tonight. And now we will have the opportunity to practice a little bit. We'll be offering some Dharma sharing. And